Hello, BookTube. I will not, repeat, not be going to the Brattle Bookshop next week. For those of you who are new to the channel, the Brattle Bookshop is a used bookstore in the heart of downtown Boston. I've been going there for well over a year. I love it. Absolutely love the place. It's a great used bookstore with lots and lots of turnover and also a sale lot next door to the store. That's large. It's the floor plan of an entire building. This was once a building. And it's full of bargain books. $1, $3, and $5. In no order other than price. So it's a browser's paradise out there. You can just spend an idle morning just looking at the books and daydreaming, which is exactly what I tend to do at the Brattle. But I will not, repeat, not be going to the Brattle next week. So I thought, well, surely you want to go this week then. You don't want to go 2 weeks without going to the shop. And then I took a look at this week, and tomorrow is going to be beastly hot, almost 90 degrees here in Boston, Fahrenheit. I think. It might not happen, but it looks like it's going to be beastly hot. And it looks like that hot weather is being pushed here ahead of a large rain system. So tomorrow, beastly hot, and then 4 days of rain, maybe. That could evaporate, so to speak, no pun intended, but it's right there, and it's in all the data, it's in all the models. So I thought, this might be your only real good chance. If you're not, repeat, not going to the Brattle next week, then this might be your only good chance to go to the shop and shop around outdoors. That is the reason why, in case if you've ever wondered, why this weird old guy on this BookTube channel is always talking about his used bookstore in terms of the weather. That's why. Because a huge part of the fun of going to the Brattle Bookshop relies on the weather. They bring the carts inside when it's rainy. So I went. Went first thing this morning. Didn't feel like first thing this morning because I didn't sleep last night, so I was just here. I was just here the whole time. The sky was dark. There was no traffic at all. The street lights were just randomly flashing yellow instead of cycling through the different lights. No people, no nothing. Every once in a while, I'd look out the window. Every once in a while, I would catch the shadow of a movement, probably a fat raccoon. They waddle down the sidewalks or especially in the gutters looking for food and cast off stuff. But they only do that in the dead of night. And even then, it's not completely safe. They do it in the dead of night because they don't want to be around people and they don't want to be around traffic. But even then, it's not completely safe because this area is definitely now looped into the outer ranges of the prey ambit of coyotes who live in the forest near here. Not 5 minutes away from here. There's at least one mated pair of coyotes there, and they range far and wide in the course of a night. So you wouldn't want to be a raccoon or a rat or a vole anywhere around here out in the open. I would occasionally look out and see the creatures of the night, the quiet like that out here, the owls. And then very gradually the sky would start to lighten just a bit, and then color starts to filter back in. Suddenly, or rather slowly, the sky starts to be a little bit purple, and the traffic picks up. People who have to be at work at 4 in the morning, another shift of people who have to be at work at 5 in the morning. They're on the road. Suddenly, it's not quiet anymore. And then gradually, very gradually, people start to show up on the sidewalks. I start to hear them on the sidewalks. And long after that, my little baby starts to wake up. She's not a morning person at all, not in the slightest. And her bladder's like that big, so she doesn't have to go. So she will notice once the light starts to come through the window. She will start to very gradually, grudgingly notice that it's not full dark nighttime anymore, and she will of course notice that I am awake and that I am reading, or maybe even sometimes writing. If she's in a position that is not going to be disturbed by me writing, then I will ease out the MacBook and do a little work. Otherwise, certainly reading. So it didn't feel like first thing in the morning to me. It felt like just an ordinary part of the day, but I was still timing it so that I would get to the Brattle nice and early, and that requires extra timing because the subway is under construction. So there are added wrinkles to get from point A to point B. That's not going to stay true. That's going to end this week. But it looks like it's going to end and go back to the more convenient arrangement right in the middle of this massive rain system that may or may not be coming through. So all these factors at play. Eventually, I suffered through and went to the Brattle. And I got a ton of books. I got just a pile of books. Had a great time. But I got a pile of books, so I wanna go over them and show them to you. I got 3 mass market paperbacks, and then a ton of hardcovers, with only 1 trade paperback and a siren. So the first paperback is for Garb August, that great Criminale event in August here on BookTube. Designed to celebrate reading trash. I found the very first Executioner book by Don Pendleton. War Against the Mafia, which is the main character's original idea, is that the Mafia kills his family, so he will kill all of them. Of course, he ends up having adventures everywhere from here to Alpha Centauri. And I read 1 Executioner book. I think I've read more of these. But in the context of Garb August, I've read 1. Where very late in his adventures, long after it would have occurred to somebody who's bright, he decides that if he's going to attack the Mafia, he should go to Sicily, attack them at the roots. This book, I think, takes place in New York. But I don't know that I've ever read the first book in the Executioner series. I found this and grabbed it. It will go on the pile for Garb August. And then I found another first book in a series, but this is far more hoity-toity. This is Alison Lurie. And this is her debut novel. If I remember correctly, Love and Friendship is her debut novel. This great minimalist cover design that I love so much. So many publishers did a variation of this at the time. This would have been, I'm going to say late 70s, early 80s. Oh, no, 1962. Oh, but this paperback was 1970. And this is an academic novel, but it's also a love affair novel, a May-December thing, if I remember correctly. I haven't read this in eons. And I'm kind of sort of curious about Alison Lurie. I'm sort of curious to know what to do with her and all the other mid-list authors who came, were featured in the intellectual landscape. It wasn't just that their latest book got a polite mention in the New York Times or the Washington Post. It was also that you as a bookseller had to know. You had to know. You didn't have to read the books or be able to quote them chapter and verse, but you at least had to know a little bit about them. You had to know which one was new and which one was a few years back. And I suppose it's theoretically possible that the last time I read this book was when it came out. But for $1, I'm definitely going to give it a try again. And then this is a BookTube-related event, a BookTube-related book. It's a June on the Range book. It's June the 4th. I should not be buying June on the Range books on June the 4th. But every year, June on the Range is a BookTube event. I'll be talking about it in another video today. It's created by Michael K. Vaughan, and it's dedicated to reading Westerns. I'm having a blast so far. And I have to say, at least 50% of the fun that I'm having this year is the off-BookTube conversations that I'm having in my inbox with people about Westerns. Just a meta conversations about Westerns, which Michael K. Vaughan started. He made a great video just a few days ago. I'm sure that you saw it. I think I left a link to it. I'll try to remember to leave a link to it again. He made a great video in the kitchen of Rustic Vaughan Lodge about reading Westerns. I made a response video of my own, but his is better than mine. And not only because he's more familiar with Westerns than I am, but also for one very startling reason in the middle of the video. If you've watched the video, you know what the reason is. It will bring you up short. And it should. It's meant to. And that video of his was all about whether or not, what are we doing when we're reading Westerns? What are they? And what are their flaws? And how can we look past those flaws? Or should we? I did an echoing video on that, and I brought it up in a couple of June on the Range videos, but I've been loving those conversations. But in June on the Range conversations on the Voxer group and whatnot, this book has come up over and over again. It is widely regarded as one of the greatest Westerns ever written. It's this book. It's Jack Schaefer's novel Shane, with this classic cover. Those of you who are in the U.S. will recognize this cover. You were almost certainly assigned this thing in school. It's 90 pages soaking wet. It's a boy's story. It's partially a Bildungsroman, partially. I've read it a couple of times. Once upon a time, I came a whisker away from having to teach it. I didn't at the last minute. I thought I was going to take a friend's entire workload, and at the end, no, that didn't happen. Thank God, that didn't happen. It might have been interesting to teach this. It's a different dynamic. Teaching a book is a different dynamic from reading it. It would, or even reviewing it. Might have been interesting to do, and certainly some. Now that I think about it, some of the other books on his list might also have been interesting to teach. But the reason that I sound so skeptical is because the times when I've read this, it has struck me as one note and very hokey. But almost everybody connected with June on the Range loves this book, and doesn't just love it in a warm, sentimental way, like they do Gates McFadden, but rather in the real way, that it really is worth all the accolades. I confess, I have never seen this as being worth its accolades, but I could very well be wrong. When it comes to Westerns, I was thinking of them as an afterthought until June on the Range 3 years ago. So I got this, it was $1, so I grabbed it. I will add it to the pile tonight. I don't know if it will be the Western that I talk about tomorrow, but I'll add it to the pile tonight. There's no reason at all that I can't read this with what I assume are completely fresh eyes, right? I mean, I've been reading tons of Westerns between now and the last time I read it. So then this next one is a second chance. One of the things I love about shopping in the sale lot of the Brattle is that you see everything there. Thousands of books cycle through there every month. Of all types and descriptions, the Brattle it just hoovers things up. They're always out buying. And so, sometimes I will get a second chance at a book. Especially if it's a book that I got here from the publisher. Thousands of those have milled through this channel over the years. And if I get a book from a publisher, it'll be one of dozens that I get that month. And if I get the book from the publisher, I try to read everything that I'm sent. And I'll get that book from a publisher, I'll read it, I'll blast through the ARC, the review copy. And I'll know right away at the end of the review copy whether or not I want to bother reading it again when I get the finished copy. It's not really a big deal for me to do because I have a lot more reading time than the rest of you, and I also read a lot faster than most people do. So committing to a reread of a contemporary book is not that big a deal for me. I've almost always been glad I did. But there are a huge number of books that I get where I don't. I know that's not necessary. I know that I'm not going to need to think about it again. And then every once in a while, there'll be a book where I read it straight through, I blast through the review copy, then I get the finished copy and I read it again. And it's working on me. I'm liking it more, but I still don't think that it's worth keeping or even writing about. So I get rid of it. But it nags at me. And the Brattle gives me a chance to go at those books again. It gives me second chances. And boy, oh boy, do I want it with this one. This is a novel by Christopher Boland. We saw this on this channel. This is, I think, from just 3 or 4 years ago. So we would have hauled it on this channel. Not that anyone watches those videos, but we would have. This is called Beautiful Crime. And it's a contemporary Venice novel, which drew me to it in the first place, about a gay couple that they go to Venice and they want to scam a wealthy art dealer. They figure it's an easy road to riches to scam this guy. He's an easy mark, and they have their patter down pat. But it doesn't quite work out that way. Each of the gay lovers gets derailed in one way or another. And the rich patsy that they have in mind turns out to have many more layers than they thought. And Venice also starts to tug at all three people. Venice is very much an active spell in the background of this book. You cannot treat it lightly. In the course of this book, you think you can. At first, you think you can, but you can't. And I remember really liking this, but for some reason, I got rid of the finished copy. I thought maybe... I don't actually know what I thought. The writing, the prose line, the pacing, the plotting, all of it I loved. But I did get rid of it. So I saw it today and just grabbed it again. Because I not only will I give it another read, my third read, I'd be willing to bet that there are no other three-time readers of Beautiful Crime by Christopher Bolin anywhere in the world. I will give it a third read, but I will not be getting rid of it this time. Definitely not. I will keep it. Then this next one's also a second chance. I have a copy of this book, but it's in really parlous condition. I found a perfect condition copy with a plastic dust jacket on it at the Brattle, so, out in the sale lot. So I grabbed it. This is Jeremy Black, and this is his official life of Lawrence of Arabia. His authorized biography of Lawrence of Arabia. So it's a huge thing like this, and I've had this many, many times. I've had many, many editions of this thing. I tend to read them until they fall apart. I find Lawrence of Arabia fascinating. He's one of the last, if not the last, people to earn spontaneously his own prepositional phrase. That almost never happens anymore. But he was a mythical figure even in his lifetime, partly, as with almost all mythical figures, that was his own design. I find him fascinating. He's also the author of one of the greatest books of the 20th century. So I'm drawn to him as the subject of a biography, and a lot of people that I've known over the years have said, okay, well, you're drawn to him as the subject of a biography, but why would you read the authorized biography? A cinder block that was watched over by Lawrence's literary estate that is going to be pious. Authorized biographies are often viewed, rightly or wrongly, as pious, as PR exercises. They're the airbrush version that the family wants or the estate wants. But they're not going to get into the nuts and bolts or the salacious dirt. And when it comes to Lawrence of Arabia, there's plenty of salacious dirt. And there are books that address it. There are books where that's their whole function. But I've never really thought that about authorized biographies. I mean, of course, it's mostly true. But I live for the chance that an authorized biography, the author's working on it forever and ever. The family, oftentimes the family, will hold in their hands very valuable resources for a biographer. We have the archives that you need, and our friends of ours have other archives, and a word from us, one telephone call, and all of that is closed to you. You'll have to write your book without it. Make nice with us, and all of that is open to you. That's terrible leverage, and that has tempted some families and some literary estates to airbrush the results of that research. But plenty of the others don't think that way. There are plenty of estate holders, one way or another, family or literary or whatever, that will vet the biographer. Sure, we want to make sure you have the right CV. We want to make sure that you're a good writer, that we can get along with you, that you're not being a bother to our friends if you want to interview them, that you have discretion and professionalism. Sure, we want that. But we absolutely don't care what conclusions you come to. Absolutely not at all. The subject matter, uncle or grandson or whatever, belongs to history. We are vetting you enough to know that you are a responsible historian. We'll let the chips fall they may after that. I like to believe that there are authorized biographies that are like that. I like to think that this is one. Maybe that's just an illusion. But I knew that the copy that I have really needs replacing, so when I saw this out in the sale lot, I grabbed it. Then this next one, I swear, I've had this so many times. I don't know how many times I've hauled it even on this channel. I get copies of it, paperback or hardcover. I get rid of them. Usually I send them to one of you. And then I find another one. If I find a copy, paperback or hardcover, that's in excellent shape, I always grab it because it is so good. Even though I shouldn't find it as fascinating as I do. This is Amanda Foreman, and this is, of course, her best-selling famous book, Georgiana, about the Duchess of Devonshire from a couple of centuries ago. This was Amanda Foreman's debut. She worked it up from her, I think, a PhD thesis. And the timing of the publication worked perfectly. The timing of the publication was aided enormously by the death of the Princess Diana, who was, of course, a member of the Spencer family that is front and center in this book. I think that aided things immensely. I think that the British reading public and the American reading public were primed to want to read about this family and this, royalty just in general because of the timing of this book. But it's also really good. It's just also really, really entertaining. Brings the Duchess of Devonshire's life into wonderful, colorful focus just all the way through. And I found this hardcover with the deckled edges, and the minute I looked at it, I did a mental inventory of my shelves to figure out if I have a copy at the moment. I don't. I think I remember sending the last trade paperback out to one of you. So now I have it again. Then we have a block of World War II books. Every time I've gone to the Brattle lately, I have come away with a block of World War II books. I have tripled the number of World War II books in my collection just in the last week. The first one here is a rebuy. This is also a second chance. This is a UK hardcover of The Storm of War by Andrew Roberts. This is his one-volume history of World War II. And I just got a copy of this, the US hardcover of this, just recently at the Brattle. I plucked it off the shelf at the Brattle at the time. I thumbed through it and saw that it was lightly annotated in pencil and thought, oh, I can live with that. And then, I don't quite remember why, I wanted to read the account of the Battle of the Bulge in this book. It might have been that David Murphy did a live stream book haul in which he hauled a book by an author who also wrote a book on the Battle of the Bulge. One reason or another, I went to that copy that I have and discovered that what I had missed the first time, which is that it's not lightly annotated in pencil. It's unbelievably annotated in pencil. So to the point where I knew it would be distracting, and I just didn't feel like turning every page with a little block eraser and getting rid of all that. I knew that I would see another copy. I didn't think I would see another copy so soon. This one's completely clean. So I'll just swap it out with that other one. Then we have Norman Davies, who's an author I really like. He has a prose style that I really like. And this is his volume on World War II in Europe. No Simple Victory, which I read. I think I reviewed this once upon a time. I'm pretty sure that I did. I think I reviewed Storm of War as well. but I really enjoyed this as a very propulsive, very edge of your seat study of the war in Europe. So I grabbed it. Actually, am I blurbed on this? No. Anthony Beaver. Well, I wouldn't be blurbed on the hardcover anyway. Okay. Well, anyway, and then the third World War II book, which is by Craig Shirley. It's a figure I really need to come to grips with. He is, well, he's one of the world's leading experts on Ronald Reagan. I don't think there's any gainsaying that. But he's also incredibly partisan. He's one of Ronald Reagan's biggest fans, and always has been, since literally the minute they met. Which introduces an element of partisan zeal into his books. He's a terrific writer, but it introduces an element of partisan zeal that is so strong that it feels partial. It's partisan zeal that feels strong enough to adulterate the quality of the history. I've always thought that way. I enjoy his Reagan books, but I've always thought that way, and I've always wondered, I wonder if it'll come time, I wonder if you'll get a chance to review a book of his, a work of history, that is not Reagan. And I did get that chance with this book, December 1941, which is all about the U.S. entry into World War II. Big, thick thing, really, really well done. Like I said, all of these authors, all three, I mean, Norman Davies and Craig Shirley, have a really, really readable prose style. And no one has a more readable prose style than Andrew Roberts. No one. So I was glad to get this. I haven't had this since I got it from the publisher. The publisher was Thomas Nelson. I got this when it came out. I reviewed this, I'm pretty sure, 2013. So before we were talking to each other. Yeah, this has reviews from John Meacham and Douglas Brinkley, Cal Thomas, the National Review, Newt Gingrich, Chuck Todd, Andrea Mitchell. They all blurb this thing. Oh my God. Oh my God, and me. Okay. All right. Well, I am blurred with Chuck Todd and Andrea Mitchell for Open Letters, for Open Letters Monthly. Okay. All right. Well, great, fantastic. So I am blurbed on the paperback. I never got the paperback from the publisher, so I'm often the last one to know any of these things. But that's terrific. But I'm gonna give it a reread. It's been a while since I read it. Always great to see, though. Boy, oh boy, it's always great to see. I tell you, Open Letters Monthly and its successor, Open Letters Review, we really do punch above our weight in terms of blurbs. We get blurbed on books. That's just terrific. And this book, Craig Shirley wrote his book with Andrew Shirley, who is a graduate of Fork Union Military Academy, a Navy veteran, and a 2013 graduate of Marymount University. and he was the principal research assistant on this book. I'm assuming that he is Craig Shirley's son. But I'm going to give this another try, definitely. Glad to have it. So there you go. There's another block of World War II books. Then we have this next one. It's big, it's heavy. I don't really go in for bigger, heavy books anymore. I mean, I know I have a lot of them here, but I do a lot of reading on my e-reader. A lot of reading where there is no weight, where there are no big, heavy books. There's no handling of anything. There's no, I want to reach over to the nightstand. Am I going to be able to handle the book with just one hand? Or is it going to slip out of my hand because of the weight? Or knock things over because of the weight? I don't usually do that much of that anymore. Instead, I'm on the e-reader where that's not an issue. But I got a gigantic volume. Partly this is wish casting. Partly this is just putting a penny down the well. One thing I've noticed that I've mentioned about the Brattle before is that when you're out in the sale lot where nothing is organized at all, you will sometimes see a book in a series, but it won't be the first book, and it won't be the last book, and it'd be the only one that's out there. It'll be the only one in the sale lot, and the instinct is, well, I would love this, but I want the whole series. So the instinct is to pass on it, and that's a bad idea. Because if you see it, there's a good chance that the other volumes are coming and just haven't got to the sale lot yet. What you should do instead is grab it, even though it lands on your shelves incomplete, and keep your eye out for the other volumes. I found an example of that today. This is Edward Gibbon. This is, who was this? Viking Penguin that did this? Alan Lane. Oh, all right. Okay. It's The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, and it's this thing. It's this publisher did 3 volumes looking like this. Big, heavy hardcovers in a 3-volume set. They brought out the 3 volumes. They also brought out a 3-volume box set, what I wouldn't give to find a copy of that. Last time, or the time before that David Murphy was here, we did see a box set of this, but it was grotesquely expensive. Whereas this was out in the sale lot. But it was just volume 2. No other volume was out there. Just volume 2 of Gibbon. So I grabbed it, not only because volume 2 of Gibbon, this volume 2 of Gibbon contains passages of his that I know better than anything else that he wrote. The chunk of his book that's about the Emperor Justinian and General Belisarius is in this volume. There's lots of other stuff too. I find Gibbon just a joy to read, just incredibly enjoyable to read. I'm going to hold on to this for a year. I'm going to see if the other volumes crop up in a year. If they don't, well, I don't want just volume 2 in this edition, so we'll see. I'll hold on to it for a year, and I think I'm going to begin to reread it, just volume 2. I'm going to begin that rereading process today, I think, because I think it would make a good essay. It'd make it something good to write on the newly revived Steve Reads over on Substack. I think that would be fun to write about, considering this volume just in isolation. And then the last thing that I got is a graphic novel. I remember when this thing came out, 1990? Is that right? Yes, 1990. Oh my God, I got it on the nose. 1990. I remember when this thing first came out. And I didn't understand at all. I thought, what on earth is this? First, this isn't the right publisher, and also, what is the size of this thing? No one's going to buy this. I don't know if anyone ever did. This is by Frank Miller, and it is him returning to one of his greatest creations, probably his greatest creation, the character Elektra from the comic book Daredevil. Frank Miller took over the writing and the artwork for the character Daredevil. He's a loser-ass Marvel superhero who dresses in red spandex, has no superpowers except a radar sense that allows him to sense his surroundings really sharply. Miller took over Daredevil and transformed it. He made it an absolutely transformative run on Daredevil. And he introduced a long-lost love of Daredevil's civilian identity, Matt Murdock. It turns out that Matt Murdock had a hot and heavy foreign girlfriend, a Greek, when he was in college. But she was also connected with the underworld, and so was her father. And her name was Elektra. And they fell tempestuously in love. But then she reappears later. She reappears years later in this Daredevil run. And comes back into Matt Murdock's life. And at first I thought, okay, it's a one-off character. You won't care. You won't come back to this. But then Frank Miller came back to Elektra, has her die. She's murdered at the hands of a psychotic supervillain, and then has her come back to life in one of the greatest storylines and one of the greatest concluding panels of any comic book anywhere. I thought, that's fantastic. Absolutely. Well, I was wrong. That is fantastic. You actually made Daredevil must-read comics. I didn't think that was possible. The problem is that Marvel Comics had the rights to Elektra. Frank Miller didn't own her. So that he couldn't actually stop them from doing anything they want with her. And they did. They made her a Skrull. They made her Daredevil for a while, as far as I know. She's not Daredevil anymore, but she might be. And of course, in 2024, she's lesbian. Of course she is. I don't know if she's black lesbian, but she is definitely lesbian. And you know, doesn't even acknowledge that she once rogered Matt Murdock all over campus. I guess. And she always has been. Didn't you notice? But before Marvel could revisit this character, Frank Miller revisited the character himself. Daredevil and Elektra, in a comic called Elektra Lives Again. And this huge thing, look at the size of this thing compared to a normal book. This is gigantic. Just enormous. And I remember thinking, how much, does this have a cover price on it? Yeah, this is $25. And it's as big as a Mississippi raft. So I saw it and I thought, who's going to buy this? Who is going to buy this? I was definitely curious what it was like. You can tell right away from the cover that Frank Miller's art style was evolving. It has continued to evolve. This is very much along the way to late period Miller, I think is what we could call it. Very much along the way to the 300. And it is also by Epic Books, Epic Comics, which I don't know if this is part of Marvel Comics, but it's Frank Miller and Lynn Varley. It's a great comic book artist team. I was curious to know what was in it and how it was done. I didn't get around to it for a long time. I don't remember when I first encountered this. But when I encountered it, I suddenly realized how gorgeous it is. How utterly gorgeous the artwork is. Just amazing with the shading and the full use of these gigantic storyboards. So what I'm saying is, retrospectively, I do agree that this size is justified. I do agree with that. It confused me at the time. Why are you revisiting this character when you gave the character such a perfect ending? Why are you doing it in such an off-putting manner that is so exclusive that comic book fans aren't going to buy this? They aren't going to want something this size that they can't put in their long boxes. They aren't going to. What are you doing this? It's weird. It's like you're trying to make it so exclusive that nobody reads it. And I didn't at first read it. In the intervening time, I have come to see that this decision was wise, because this is not recapturable. Elektra Lives Again was reprinted as a relatively normal-sized paperback. The full effect of the visuals is lost. And in a rare instance, I think the full effect of the visuals is lost electronically as well. The warmth of the color gradation is lost electronically. This is, in fact, the way to look at this. Frank Miller was right about that. So I was amazed to find a copy at the Brattle. I think this is fairly hard to find, fairly collectible. I was amazed to find a copy, and I will soak it up slowly in terms of rereading it. So there you go. That was a trip to the Brattle. The last trip to the Brattle until at least the middle of the month. No trips to the Brattle next week, but also no more trips to the Brattle this week. Tomorrow's going to be boiling hot, and then maybe deluges of rain. So this is going to have to do. We have Elektra Lives Again by Frank Miller in this original big hardcover. We have just Volume 2 of Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. We have Craig Shirley's December 1941, Norman Davies' No Simple Victory, and Andrew Roberts' A Storm of War, so 3 World War II books. We have Georgiana, Duchess of Devonshire, by Amanda Foreman, a winning book. We have Jeremy Black's authorized biography of Lawrence of Arabia. We have A Beautiful Crime, back for the third time, for the third bite at the apple. And then mass market paperbacks. Shane, which goes on the pile tonight. Love and Friendship, Alison Lurie's debut novel. And finally, The Executioner, The War Against the Mafia, the very first Executioner novel. I'm not 100% sure, but it's possible that Executioner novels are still being written. But that was the first one. So, all set for Garb August. So there you go. That was the Brattle. It's going to have to satisfy all of us until the next time I go back. Thank you, BookTube.